Hey, good afternoon or morning, wherever you are. Jason Webster, CEO, founder of Archetype. I'm here with Marty Gobb and David Scarbeary. And it's just a conversation about data analytics, data science, and 2023, where we are. So let's dig in a little bit. Marty, who are you?
So Marty Gobb, I spent 22 years in the Air Force on active duty, graduated from the Air Force Academy with a degree in ops research and economics, and wanted to get into studying math and modeling. And the Air Force has a career field called Scientific Analyst, which is data science. So I spent most of my career doing that, either at bases with big problems overseas in Afghanistan, analyzing the battle space, or at the Pentagon, working through policy. Left the Air Force, retired, and then went to work for a little bank and insurance company in San Antonio called USAA. Went from like the military to a military-like place, and learned a lot about insurance, banking, business, commercial business in general. It's interesting working for a profit company as opposed to a nonprofit, and a different way of thinking. And then came to Archetype about a year and a half ago to head up the data science practice here. And it's been great working on all kinds of different projects. Some of them very simple, others very complex. And it's just, that's what I love about it, is it's always a variety. Get to learn new tools, get to try new things out, and then get to meet new people.
Yeah, and it's been great having you. David, who are you?
Very interesting, Marty. Nice to meet you, Jason. There's a long arc of careers, I think, and we'll try and keep them short. But I had a very similar start as yourself in the Air Force. Enlisted, 79 to 83 active, and then 2 years reserve. And I didn't know what this job was when I took it. The recruiter, he scores you. Oh, you could do this, and I'd like to travel around the world. And I don't know what this is, but here, 3 out of 4 bases are overseas, so give that a try. And it turns out, radio communications analyst. What is that? And I end up at a Cold War listening post in southern Italy with a great big antenna in 1979. And so ended up during the Iran-Iraq war serving and during when the hostages were still in Tehran and we had hijacking.
So that like SIGINT? Like you're like listening
to... So listening to radios, listening. And I was analyzing. Others were listening, to Diddy Pops, very old school radios, 79. And then was with a mobile unit for a couple of years, and so I flew as a Middle East area specialist on AWACS out of Saudi Arabia, doing their air defense and watching the Iran-Iraq war live and that sort of thing. But never in harm's way, really.
So the AWACS is that plane. It looks like a commercial plane with a big old disc on top.
Yeah,
almost like a UFO stuck to the top of the plane, right?
Yeah. It was a great start of understanding the urgency of information, right? So, if you've got, national security information, then you need to get it to decision makers quickly.
Yeah.
And it was interesting after talking this morning with Mitchell and thinking about he was interested in that arc and thinking of executives. And I think of this all the time. And I talk with folks that I'm bringing into analytics. I've done financial planning and analytics, and I've done mergers and acquisitions and staffing, all kinds of different things in the telecom industry, petroleum refining and marketing. Here in the U.S. and U.K., planning gas stations. How do we build a lubricant blending operation in the U.S. or how do we staff call centers for DirecTV agents? So a lot of variety. It's about making decisions. I love what I heard you guys talking about forecasts, right? How do I look out? And as we were just talking a minute ago, when my heart and soul right now has been in DirecTV. I got invited to create a zero-based model for them to staff call centers, staff, because you have to plan on the people you need to pick up the phones a good 3 months, 4 months in advance. You lock your vendors in. And so if you miss that, it's millions of dollars one way or the other. Your customers aren't satisfied. And so our head of operations, I told you, she banned the word seasonality from, forecast meetings. I don't want, if you tell me it's just because it always goes up in August, that doesn't work. No, we need to know. So I built a zero-based level modeling there that would help assess the risk and opportunity. And you can't predict, but at least we can estimate. And tools that we have throughout all of my arc for several decades now, the level of that accuracy changed, increased, morphed.
Yeah.
We think it's gotten improved, but the more it gets improved, the more it's subject to interpretation. And like you said, we've got to look at those exceptions.
I mean, do you agree that seasonality is not an actually important set of data? I mean, I have a shape, a curve in my mind that is our business every year. And our business, whether we like it or not, has a same curve to our revenue graph,
Sure.
right? Seasonality.
I would work with you to say, okay, let's investigate that further. What's underneath that? What's driving that? Sure, it happens every August.
Yeah,
And I had a fun time with some folks at DirecTV. We had the NFL Sunday ticket, right? Great big thing. We renew customers. So we you gave it to you free last year, so we renew it, and send you a bill for $45 in June.
Yeah.
What happens? Pick up the phone, right? What's this? And so is that seasonal? No, it's business driven, right?
Exactly, yeah.
But I laughed one year when I had some analysts asked to get me on the call, and they'd been analyzing this for weeks. Oh my gosh, we've got a churn and retention issue. We've got all of these 1-year-old customers calling us. Congratulations, you just found the NFL renewal cycle. So you need to understand your business.
Yeah, absolutely. So like the beginning of data science is understanding how the business works in its raw state, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's that domain knowledge that you need to understand. You need to know that NFL ticket is something you buy at a certain time and it lasts so long. So it would appear, if you just looked at the data, as a seasonal effect, but then you get a data expert who says, no, it's not a seasonal effect. It's our own effect because of the way we set up the program. If, you can't do this with the NFL, but if you could sell the NFL on a monthly basis, and then you wouldn't have a seasonal effect anymore because people would renew at different times. But that's what's so important is that domain experience, that knowledge.
And turning that into the marketing opportunities. Because what happened, what we do with that when we have something that's renewing, if your Netflix is renewing, if whatever your subscription is coming off, and then I want to make sure that I retain you. And so we build programs in any business. We want to build the programs around that look for those cycles. So I'm very curious. You've piqued my curiosity on your seasonality. I want to think about the pace of your people or the buyers or your activities in the market that are stimulating those things, and then how do I address those? So then when I take 3 million additional calls between the middle of June to the middle of August, and I make sure that I redirect those to temporary call centers to save that customer and keep them on board and make sure that they're happy and look at the value of what they're purchasing. That gives me an extra save opportunity and a conversation to keep them and retain them as a customer.
So I agree with what you're saying. It makes a lot of sense for the non-educated kind of Cro-Magnon over here.
No, sorry.
But in general, I want to throw something else in here. I think looking at it from that perspective lives on one side, but there's a tension here that really talks to the idea that like let's look at all the data and really start from no assumptions, no knowledge of business. And I talk about the idea that I don't think our business customers spend nearly enough time in the non-relevant details. Meaning, like, let's think about CSI, like forensics, right? Forensics are like everything's data until proven otherwise, right? So you come to a crime scene, like everything's relevant. Every fiber in the carpet that's not part of the carpet, everything's relevant until we eliminate it as being noise, right? Where our business customers don't think that way, and probably because they just don't have time to think that way. They've got a monthly deadline, a weekly deadline, a quarterly deadline, an annual deadline. Like it's one deadline to the next.
The tools bring us so much more information more quickly, but it still requires us to do that interpretation.
Right.
The Air Force still has Intel analysts digesting materials as much as they've got it, automated. And that listening post is no longer sitting there in Italy. Those have all they called them elephant cages. Those have all been taken. All but one have been taken down. And in fact, it was funny. Sorry, quick, funny
Please.
Thing that happened about a month ago. I'm down here at the Confluence and struck up a conversation with I love dogs, and lady's dog and her son comes out, young son, cropped hair, young-looking, good-looking lad. And so just brief introduction to him. Well, he's separating from the Air Force, and he was a satellite analyst, satellite communications. He was basically doing what I did, but he did it from a windowless building in Nebraska. I did it from a windowless building in Italy. And so it's changed a bit over the years, but bringing that information together and the speed of that information to come together, and then being able to interpret it and look for those anomalies. And then let's not forget, let's grab all that stuff and bring it together, but not forget to put that human element in that. Something that, why do we do assisted machine learning? Because the machine can go off in a direction that it shouldn't be.
Yeah, there need to be guardrails, right?
But when is that anomaly the signal?
Right. Yeah.
And I can recognize as the signal. If anyone remembers the Soviet invasion of Iran in 1982. Nobody?
I was 10.
It
So.
didn't happen, right? It didn't happen. But we war gamed that out in the desert of Utah, or Nevada, deserts of Nevada, in a tent. And as I've thought about this a couple of times, where I was on the player side, we do red force.
Yeah.
Red versus blue. Yep.
Red versus blue, and I was blue force, and so they're feeding us information. And in day 3, I see an anomaly.
So blue's good guys, red's bad guys?
We're blue, I'm good guy.
Yeah.
And the controllers have set up, they're feeding us information, and I see an anomaly. And I took that anomaly and I extrapolated it out. And I looked at what I had and what I've been seeing and the force levels. And, the war game was divisions of Soviets on the border, not battalions. Okay, we're talking tens of
So
thousands
like risk,
instead
it's
of
like
thousands.
the cannon.
Yeah,
on
the
X.
risk was just jumped, tenfold from what
I mean the
commanders
game
thought
of
it
risk,
was.
right? The game of risk, you got the soldiers,
Right.
and the cannons, and the X's.
But this
and-
was, and my point is that anomaly needs human interpretation
Yeah.
and then an analytics to look at it. And I had the exercise controller who I knew come to me the next day. Did you have extra information? Did you look at the plans? No, I looked at the anomaly and I said, I asked, what if? And that's what I think we have a hard time translating. A lot of airmen have a hard time translating. How do I translate that to my CEOs?
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones that have these great ideas to go out and take risks and forge new areas. And here's how we as planners, doing the planning and economics, can help show them the vision of where it is and where those anomalies do exist and opportunities exist for them to go take advantage of them.
I think it really comes down to modeling in a big picture. These CEOs have a mental model from their experience. Good luck getting them to translate that into a mathematical model. It may never happen, but they know something. I remember distinctly walking into a general's office once, and I told him my results, and he looked at me, and he said, "Marty, you're wrong." And I looked at my boss, and I said, "Is he allowed to say that?" Because the mathematical model, was foolproof. So I thought, it's 10,000 pages of code. There was an inequality in the wrong direction. When I flipped it the right direction, it got the exact results he knew should happen. And it was because he had a mental model that told him this is what should happen. Marty, your math model isn't fitting my mental model. So we're at a junction here where either he's wrong or I'm wrong. And this is where I think analysis and data have to work together, because you have to be humble enough that both of you look at each other and say, okay, who is really wrong? And who's wrong and why are we wrong? And then let's figure out what the right answer is. Because sometimes it's very one-sided. Other times it's you're both wrong. Yeah. And there's a third answer. And you wouldn't have found out if you didn't have that conflict. And it's that anomaly you're talking about. It's that idea of working together with the data source and the model and figuring out where's the conflict. I think that's the important
What
part.
are those probabilities? I mean, right and wrong, right? There's a probability and there's a possibility there. And I've always said, my master's is in economics. and then I CFA charter holder, chartered financial analyst. And so, I'm not an MBA. I estimate things. I don't do, I don't do math. That's what spreadsheets were created for. Not math in my head, right? But how do we look at those probabilities and outcomes, and how much certainty he knew you were wrong, or what's my certainty in what I'm presenting to him? As you were saying that, I was remember that I saw y'all were founded by a couple of folks out of Paris. The gentleman, Dataiku.
Dataiku was founded, yes,
And
in Paris.
the first decade of my career was with Total Energy.
Yeah.
Back then, Total Compagnie Française de Pétrole. And I worked for a Frenchman here in the U.S., Patrick Sprace, and he ended up being managing director of Total Benelux for years, and finished his career in Paris. He's now retired in the suburbs, director of a school, a beautiful little school. Patrice taught me the French have a way of doing corporate planning, and they will tend to have a planning and economics group that's right there with the CFO, the CIO, this chief marketing officer, and then you've got planning and economics. And that was our structure here at Total Petroleum North America. And Philippe Danoyer ran Total Denver for about 25 years. Daniel Vallot came in, and I was there on both of their tenures and on the handover, and worked for Vallot. And struck by how planning and economics had a seat at the table, right? We were there. And we took those probabilities and we built those in, and we were open with the CEO, with Daniel, about what our assumptions were. Because what I learned from Patrice, he's got needs for businesses. We've got to make a bid for those stores. We've got to make this decision quickly, quickly or not. And we would have a quick conversation of, are we meeting? When? How long do I have? That was usually my first question. When does Mr. Vallot need to know? When does he got to make a decision? When are we meeting with him? Do I have 2 days or do I have 2 weeks?
Right.
Because the data that I'm going to use, whether I'm going to get an AI to scrape customer analytics, or I'm going to go through and look at the trending, or build a new model, or use existing, it all depends on that time scale. And then I would agree with Patrice. And then when we would go into Mr. Vallot to look at what was proposed, the assumptions that we made to get there in 24, 48 hours to make a bid on an entire chain of 100 stores were on the table. Okay, you gave me this amount of time. Here's what I've made this decision. Here's what I'm projecting, and this is why, within X millions of dollars, I think the seller's crazy, or we've got a bargain on the table. And if I have that information on Tuesday morning, whether this guy is offering me a bargain or I should just step out, but he's got the information of what those assumptions are.
Yeah.
I've got more time and due diligence. Then I'll do the due diligence as the weeks go on.
Well, I think people underestimate the perishability of data, right? And the information we know today, and it's these values are typically moving in different directions, and vectors are changing, and it's a snapshot that as soon as you're analyzing it's history, right? And you're actually creating more data as you wait and analyze it. I have a long-standing friendship with a gentleman who used to work for Raytheon and Martin Marietta, who was basically a rocket scientist, right? And he worked on rockets that went to space. He also worked on the Hellfire missile, which you aim it at a tank and it goes this way up in the air and right down the top of the tank, because that's the softest spot. But writing that code to do that is incredibly complicated, and he wrote it, right? So a dear friend of mine, he's my senior, and one day he calls and says, "Hey, my son's looking for a job." I'm like, "Tell me about your son." And talked to his son. His son was an engineer, graduated from college with a degree in engineering, and came into work as a consultant. And we jumped into the Affordable Care Act and worked at a state level working on health plans. And we were pulled into a state exchange as you guys had to figure out what's broken and how to fix it. We weren't the ones that built it. And I'm like, all right. I said, you need to meet me here at the capital of the state. Start driving, be here tomorrow. And he was my right-hand man. I knew I couldn't be there forever. So I was he's got to pick up where I leave off, right? Second week, our key customer representative, so someone working for the state, comes to us and says, "I need an answer to this question." He says, "I'll get back to you in 3 days." And the guy's face turned red and walked away. And I said, "I'll be right back." And I went and talked to the gentleman and said, came back and said, no, we're going to get him an answer in about 30 minutes. He goes, Jason, that's impossible. I said, you have to realize that it's always possible to give an answer. The quality of information and the caveats differ. There's no such perfect answer. But if he wants a 30-minute answer, there are caveats. So give him your answer and give him the caveats.
Right.
If he wants a 3-day answer, it's a better answer with fewer caveats. And frankly, that's part of being a consultant, right?
Well, and in data analytics, it took me 6 months to build the DirecTV model, phase one of the model of forecasting, zero-based forecast.
Yeah.
It took some time sifting through it. And a lot of times what I will try to train other analysts in the business of, they don't necessarily, a lot of analysts on my side, and I'm an analyst, but you call us an analyst. I'm not a data farmer. I do a monthly presentation at AT&T Wireless, and I talk about our data farmers, right? The ones that are setting up the systems and setting up, and then I cook it and clean it, is the way I put it. And I have got to put a lot of stores away to have at my fingertips, because the next business question that comes in, I don't have time to build for that.
Why is a lot harder than what?
Yeah. Well, and then what is the business question that they're really facing?
Mm-hmm.
That they're really facing? How many times, the executive knocks on the door and, I've got them knocking. David, I need this. I need to know X. How many of X with Y?
Yeah.
Great. I can do that for you. What exactly are we facing? What are we dealing with? What's our situation on the battlefield?
Mm-hmm.
What's our situation in the business? And often when I have this conversation, we go down and I say, well, actually, if you're trying to make that decision, I actually have a 30-minute answer for you. That's
Right,
not
right.
you might have just asked me a 3-week question, and I might be able to give you a 30-minute answer because I've been understanding my
Modeling,
data
yeah.
over time,
Yeah.
and I've been building my base level of intelligence,
Yeah.
my understanding. Why did I build, a profile and a battle plan of, Iran 1982, right? We had one, right? We knew exactly what they looked like and what they were offering and how many F-4s and F-14s they had up in the air and whether those things had excess missiles that could sink a Navy destroyer in the Gulf. And what happens with one of those things is flying straight at you in the strait, and you think it's an F-14 with an anti-ship missile. Those decisions, are critical. But you've got to have that. You've got to build that portfolio of knowledge in order to pull it and use it.
So, 5 years ago, our business was a business around closed consolidations, FP&A, and really supporting finance in their core operations. Data science was not a thing discussed at all in finance at all. On the other side, we built data warehouses and basements, right? And data warehouses and basements cost $2 million. They took 2 years to build and had a 50% success rate, which was like just a terrible track record for data warehousing, right? Those were our businesses, and we were pretty good at what we're doing. Fast forward to now, and the distance between these two businesses is now a Venn diagram. We don't build data warehouses and basements anymore. We throw things in the cloud and spin them up in minutes and not weeks, right? It's a different world. And I'm curious as to what you think. Like when you guys think about your background, your training from a military perspective, ops research or like SIGINT, right? It's like you fast forward that, you come into this world right now where we've got all of a sudden this convergence of really cool technology, fun toys to play with. Like what does that look like?
I think I'm going to surprise you a little with my answer. I think we almost have too much information. So
Okay.
now our job is to sift through all the noise
Yeah.
to find the signal. And I would say, I think part of my job as a data scientist is to separate that signal from the noise.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I've seen dashboards that you need a magnifying glass to look at. It causes epileptic seizures because so many dials are changing.
Yeah.
What are you telling the boss? It's kind of like, do you want to check engine light or do you want to know every little thing that's going on in your car? If it's going well and the check engine light's not on, I'm okay. I don't need to know anything.
Right.
How many of us have tire monitors that go off constantly? And you go, my tire's fine. It may be 1 pound below where it should be, but that's not an alarm. So I
Depends
think
if you ask my wife, you ask me.
So I think we've gotten to a point now where all this information in the cloud,
Yeah.
it's almost like it's a drug and we need to we feel compelled to use it all. No, use the right information. And that's part of our job, is to sift through what is the right information to
Well,
use.
I think the bigger question is, how do you recalibrate the conversation with either leadership or customers to say, hey, before we go on this epic journey through the land of data to maybe find nothing but an empty cauldron where the gold used to be, like, how do we set expectations and better guardrail what we're doing with our customers before they spend all the money and time?
You said it. It's getting the right question, I think, is what you were getting at.
Yeah.
Is finding out, you asked me this. If I give you an answer, is that really what you're looking for, or what are you really wanting to know? And sometimes they want to know something that just isn't knowable. We haven't created mind reading abilities yet.
Not yet.
But there's other things where they'll ask a question because they think this will answer their question, but they're really not asking. They're asking for a measure, not a question. And
Right.
so, again, the knowledge of the data and knowing, hey, I keep getting asked this question. I don't think that's really what you want. I think you want something else. Talk to me and have that back and forth. And instead of formulating a 30-minute answer, maybe formulate a 15-minute question and then a 15-minute answer. And it'll probably be a lot better than a 30-minute answer to a question that doesn't pertain to really what they want to know.
Yeah.
I think that's where it comes back. And it's this back and forth with the client, the customer, the executive, whatever, to say, what are you looking for? And
Yeah.
how can we use data to answer your question?
Yeah. Closing thoughts?
Usable data.
Yeah.
Usable. I mean, and too often it's tempting to play with the shiny new toy, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And to chase it but it's also valuable. Which ones that we invest in that are going to pay off really big down the line? Which one do we need for blocking and tackling?
Mm-hmm.
And how do we go from, as you said, I remember on it was map info, using the map info on sort of a big desktop server level machine that was crunching customers in England on their frequent fueler program. That data set there, as you talked with your guys about, you run it in the garage and now it's in the cloud. We put it on servers and then we put it in the server center. I did a stint at Quest Cyber Solutions where we were doing what was called an application service provider at the time, now software as a service.
Yeah.
We were hosting SAP, ERP, PeopleSoft,
Yeah.
Siebel for clients, Quest Cyber, KPMG, in our data centers. And how do we build that for them and put it together? And now that data is out there. Now it's in the cloud. And I love Snowflake. It's wonderful. I've used, SASE and the Teradata and Toad, and we were on DB2 mainframe back in the late 80s. A little bit different. So quite an arc from there to now. Yeah. And Snowflake Cloud, the availability of that. But then what are we building in the Snowflake Cloud and how are we using it? And if we're burping it out to a dashboard that was built to track a series of events or a cycle, and nobody really notices that actually it's leading us off in another direction.
Yeah.
And if somebody wasn't watching it and reconciling it and saying, yikes, guys, this is deviated. And it's only, it's either pointing in the wrong direction, right? It's not just an engine warning light that it's not really down 2 pounds. It's giving us a green light when really there's a risk of a red light underneath.
Yep.
I worked on a project for a retail store we've all shopped at probably 24 times. And we built this system we called Radar. And Radar was store reporting. So you could see what was happening at every store in great detail immediately. This is early days of like client, web-based client stuff. It was expensive. It was millions of dollars to deploy the system. And a new CIO walked in and said, tell me how this is better than my MicroStrategy application in the basement. Like that, you're wasting a lot of money here. Show me, how do we pay for this? Where's the ROI? We went back to our office and racked our brains like for tangible ROI. We found it. The least experienced person on our team asked the right question, which is, okay, how are they doing this before? Well, it's obvious it's FedEx. We're FedExing things out to the stores. How much does FedEx cost? Well, $9 per FedEx envelope. Okay, how many is that? Look, why are we talking about this? 2 minutes later, we realized we paid for the project in less than a year in FedEx costs alone. So like, it's good news and bad news, right? The good news is it paid for itself. The bad news is like, it isn't about economic value or ROI in terms of like increased revenue or decreased cost. It was really just a process improvement, right? Which is sometimes like that's good enough, but it's not the sexy answer. Any closing thoughts?
Well, I think I've worked on plenty of non-sexy projects, and some of them are just data mining, where they get hung up that data science should be predictive analytics, and I argue no, it's data science. It's about the data, and it takes a data scientist somehow who is a forensics investigator and doesn't look at the anomaly and go, it's okay, I'm not going to worry about it. They want to know why. And that's what leads you down the path to figure out what's going on. It's understanding your data and getting insights from the data. That's not sexy, but when you save the company millions of dollars because you found something, or you really point to the process that this actually happened to us. My employee that worked for me was upset that his model wasn't going to get deployed because his model basically pointed out a flaw in their system, and they fixed the system, and then the model became obsolete. I said, mission accomplished. You just saved them $100,000 a month, and we don't have to go through all the pain of deploying a model in our governance system. That's like a double win. You got to do all the fun math and solve a problem, and you don't have to do all the follow-up work. That unsexy problems are the sexy problems, because they save the company money, and they build you the credibility then that they want you to go, hey, what if we could do the sexy stuff? Now you're in.
Yeah. David, closing thoughts?
And AI, I think some of the new technologies are changing the game in customer experience and customer contact. And they're literally changing the entire landscape of contact support. And there's an earthquake going on. And some are seeing it, some are watching. I've watched some begin, and watching customer experience and modeling, omni contact, whether they're calling us or in the IVR or online or whatever they're doing, and the ability of AI to leverage that. It can go in funky directions if we're not careful. I mean, or even from a marketing and other contact perspective, my wife Patricia laughs because she's getting, ads for O'Reilly Auto Parts after I bought the battery down the street. And somebody's tracking our home, IP address, and they're wasting money. Someone has bid for that ad live. I know how this, works. And so O'Reilly bid for that live, and they went into the right IP address, but they got the wrong device. She shouldn't understand it, but we have enough conversations about this where she says,
and it's free advertising for O'Reilly on this video now.
Right. And they have veterans discount O'Reilly, if I can put it in.
Well, USAA keeps sending advertisements to my parents who are not eligible for membership, period, end of story. How much marketing value is being lost because I'm their son and I have a home of record at their house because of the military. And you would think a company that works with the military understands this. So someone isn't looking at the data right, just to, like you said, they're missing an opportunity here. And that's where AI can come in and help find some of those anomalies, those mistakes, those issues. And the beauty of it, do it at scale. And a lot cheaper at scale than a human can do it. And then have a human look at it and go, oh, we need to look into this area more, or this other stuff, not as important.
And don't forget that human interaction. Okay, so in a call center environment, so it costs me X dollars to answer a call. Well, it costs me 200X if I lose a customer.
Yes,
absolutely.
And I'd rather invest pennies today to speak with someone. It gets down to that human interaction. I've worked with a team recently, and they transformed our customer handling for a particular segment, and I won't go into details. But they were thanking me the other day. They were like, "Oh, David, I've been working with them for 2 years. We've transformed this." No, it's not. Don't look at me. You guys did it on the ground, person to person, making connections, and we can't forget about that. That we leverage this data to make those connections.
Yeah, and that's fundamentally our success as the data wonks, right? Is seeing that our data is actually used. And great examples there by people on the ground who are driving the business forward or solving the problem, and the result has impact. So thanks for your time. I appreciate it. To be continued, but a great conversation.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
It was fun.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.